So in this Tactics Explained episode, I'm going to be tactically breaking down why I like the 4-2-2 possession system so much, what are the benefits of having a double false 9, and how this can be applied to Manchester United. So let's get right into it. There's not going to be much editing, just pure analysis from the tactics board. So this is what United currently use in the build-up phase, and I guess you'd call it a 4-3-3 on paper, but in the build-up phase it resembles more of a 3-3-2-3 if you are including the goalkeeper. And as you can see, because whoever the manager is, let's say Erik ten Hag in regards to Manchester United, will usually instruct the front three to hold high positions, looking to pin the opposition's defensive line backwards, in order to maximise the space between the opposition's defensive and midfield lines. Now just quickly, I should say before I go on, the issue that United have in the build-up phase isn't necessarily just the possession shape, as you can use a variety of different shapes, but it's more about the coordinated movement between players. But this is where the difference between the standard 4-3-3 setup and the 4-2-4 or the 4-3-4 system comes into play, as what we are trying to do is to bait the opposition into man-to-man pressing us aggressively. And this is because when the opposition are pressing you man-to-man, this means that with the movement of your own players, you're able to then manipulate the position of the individual opposition players, and therefore because you can manipulate the position of each individual player, you can therefore manipulate the whole opposition's defensive shape in order to create spaces for you then to exploit. And this is how I would go about doing this. I would have the front four initially sitting high with the opposition's back four, using a double pivot rather than a single pivot in midfield. Now to many people this would seem counterintuitive, as surely by using a front three instead of a front four, you can still pin the opposition's backline backwards but also create overloads in the centre, using a single pivot and two central midfielders against the opposition's double pivot, rather than making it easier for them to man-to-man press your double pivot with their double pivot. Now I should have said from the start that I am assuming the opposition are going to be pressing in a narrow 4-4-2, just because that is what most sides in the Premier League will look to do this season, I would anticipate. But in regards to the point I just made, yes, that is true. Of course a midfield three using a single pivot can be very effective, and we saw exactly how it can be so effective from Hurtzler's Brighton against Everton in the opening game week of the season, where James Milner's high position between Idrissa Gueye and McNeil enabled him to run off the back of McNeil when he looked to pressurise Veltman, the right back, when he received the ball, wherefrom because of Milner's high and wide position, Idrissa Gueye couldn't get over to him enough. Veltman plays a pass down the channel, and then Milner can progress the ball with a pass back in field into Minte, progressing the ball into Everton's half. However, by allowing the opposition to man-to-man press you in their narrow 4-4-2, you can now cause the centre-backs a positional dilemma. But what exactly do I mean by this? Well, I'm going to come on to that in just a bit. But before that, if you want to pick up any of the new season jerseys, go over to Jersey FIFA. They've also got retro, international and club jerseys as well. Use code Atlantis at checkout for a discount. A link will be in my Instagram bio, which I will leave linked in the description. So how can the use of a double false 9 put the opposition centre-backs in positional dilemmas? Well, just think about it logically. What is the one area of the opposition's defensive system that they do not want to vacate? Well, it's the centre of the back line. And so with both centre forwards dropping off into the space behind and slightly wide of the opposition's midfield double pivot, our wide attackers can then retain a high and wide position, and now the centre-backs of the opposition have to make a decision. If they don't want to completely vacate the centre of the defence, one centre-back could follow and the other could sit. However, this would then give us a free man behind the opposition's midfield line. If both centre-backs follow our centre-forwards into deeper positions, this would then open up massive space centrally in the back line, alongside the space on the deeper area of the flank. And this is where you can use your free man to play out of the defensive third, and that free man is of course the goalkeeper, as the opposition can only press with a maximum of 10 players, as they can't send their goalkeeper forward to press, which will naturally give you a man advantage inside your own box. If the opposition wants to stop you playing out through the flanks, they can drop their wide midfielders slightly deeper, but then this will give you a 3v2 inside of the box. If the wide midfielders sit high and narrow looking to press our centre-backs and goalkeeper, then this will leave massive amounts of space on the flank for a lofted pass over the top of one of the wide midfielders, from where if the pass and the control from the fullback is right, there is then the space for the fullback to drive into. But if the early lofted pass out to the flanks isn't on, you can either look for a series of short and quick passes through the centre in De Zerbi-esque fashion, utilising the concepts of following the press and baiting the press with square passes. However, doing this effectively is entirely dependent on your coordinated movement, and it has to be right, and so I'll go over those concepts in a separate video. But let's say we move the ball out to the right-sided centre-back. Well, now with our right winger pinning the opposition's left-back backwards, now the false 9 on that side can look to drop into this space, which works to either drag the opposition centre-back very high up the pitch in an uncomfortable position where he doesn't really want to be, vacating the space behind, or if the centre-back holds his position deep, now you have a a free man and an overload on the flanks. Also, if you can shift the ball from one side to the other quickly, this is going to give your centre back on that side more time and space to receive the ball, because the opposition's front two would have been dragged from one side to the other, and because your back three of the two centre backs and the goalkeeper is obviously going to be wider than their front two, you should have this space when you circulate the ball quickly from one side to the other, across the box out to the other side. And if you do this effectively and efficiently, this can create a 2v1 with your fullback and centre back against the opposition's wide midfielder on that side. But even if the opposition does do a good job of shifting over quickly and limiting spaces between the lines, they still have the issue of what their centre backs do with your double false 9. As when the opposition is on the right, for example, the opposition's right-sided centre back on the other side isn't going to want to push up tight to that centre forward sitting in your left-sided half space, as this would leave the centre of their defence completely open, which is where the high and wide positioning of your wide attackers comes into play, as they can now look to make these diagonal runs into the centre, looking for a long pass to release them into that space, looking to hopefully get into a 1v1 or at least a chance creating position. However, by dropping off and closing off this space, now one of your centre forwards should be free behind the opposition's midfield line, with their double pivot pushing up onto your double pivot, creating that space. From here you can then look to play a lofted pass from either the goalkeeper or centre back over the press into either the player's chest or feet, or even look to work the ball from one side to the other and then split the opposition's midfield with a pass between their central midfielder and their right-sided midfielder, finding one of your false nines in space, from where they can now turn and look to play forward, with the centre back who was originally man-to-man pressing them sitting maybe 10 or 15 yards deeper in a defensive line, and so won't be able to get to them in time to stop them being able to turn. So how can this 4-2-2 setup be used by Manchester United? Well, not much would have to change in terms of the personnel, as you're just moving from a single pivot of Agate to a double pivot with Mainu alongside him and Bruno Fernandes initially starting in the front two. But when it comes to the coordinated movement, I think United have the perfect front four, with both Xerxes and Bruno Fernandes being much better as link men and playmakers rather than the runners in behind. And so when United are looking to play out the defensive third, both Xerxes and Bruno Fernandes can look to drop off into this space behind the midfield line, looking to receive a line breaking pass from one of the centre backs into their feet with their back to goal, from where Xerxes or Fernandes can link the play with a bounce pass into the fullback on the outside or a bounce pass to someone on the inside. However, the reason I like United in this particular possession setup so much is because the deeper movement of Xerxes and Bruno Fernandes would work to open up the exact space that Rashford needs in order to make those diagonal runs from out to in, with either Amad or Garnacho doing the same on the far side. And so the way this 4-2-2 possession system functions is that the deeper movement of the front two is not just to allow them to receive a pass from deep, but also to create space for those diagonal runs of the wide attackers, or instead in order to create an overload in the centre if one of the centre backs holds their position. The system relies upon forward movement, particularly the fullbacks running off the back of the opposition's wide midfielders to allow them to receive a bounce pass from either Xerxes or Bruno Fernandes, and both Dalot and Mazraoui have the sort of athleticism and ball carrying ability to perfectly suit this type of role. Xerxes and Bruno Fernandes are the link men and playmakers, whilst Rashford and either Amad or Garnacho are the inside forwards who should be getting into the goal scoring or the goal creating positions from their runs in behind. So thank you for watching. You can check out my Patreon if you want to read any of my articles. A link will be in the description and the comment section below.